here with Three Chord Marriage in the Fight podcast. And my very special guest, I'm very honored about this, by the way. And you know I'm honored when I lean into the microphone. Mr. Joshua Washington. Joshua, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
And where are we?
We are at the Christian Chamber Expo, and it is live and in full effect. I love it.
It is in full effect. There's like a piano guy over there.
Yeah,
he's just jamming.
Yeah, he's singing and jamming, and we're here on mics trying to keep shh, can you break it down a little bit?
And we are. I'm going to have someone go and yell at him in a minute. Not really.
No, it's
not really. That's not our thing. No. This is really exciting that you've taken the time to be with us here today, because you got a lot going on, right? You are a busy young man.
Yeah, we have a lot going on, my family and I, and we got involved with the Christian Chamber and in our own business, running our own business. So yeah, you're right. There's absolutely a lot going on.
Well, let's talk about that for a minute. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your family and share with us all the different projects, because I understand you're an author, yes. Right? You've got your own business, you're a father, yes. A husband, like all these things we were just talking about. Yeah. That takes up a lot of time, so tell us about all that.
Yeah, I think the jobs that I'm most invested in and proud of is the job as a husband and as a father. Those two are really, really the reason why I do everything else, besides yes. God. So those two things. I have a 2-year-old son. His name is Nehemiah.
All right.
My wife was here earlier, but she had to go actually pick up our son to get him ready for bedtime. I'm be here a little late tonight.
Okay.
But yeah, we've been married 7 years. I've been together 10, and it's just been touched by God, man. It's been a blessing, and it keeps growing. And now that we are business owners, so I started a business geared towards kind of personal development, really for men, but not exclusively to men, but really helping develop the value of men. And I call it the Joshua mentality. So the book you talked about that I wrote is called The Mentality of Success. And it's really about helping young men and young women even to activate their dreams and unlock the purpose that God has placed inside of them. So
that's you know what, that's amazing, because it's so needed today, right? With everything that we see going on just in general out there. To be focused on that for the younger people coming up. Have you had the opportunity now in this business? You're working directly with young people?
Well, that's kind of what I've been doing for the last 10 years, honestly. I got started really early, and it's because of my story. I didn't grow up knowing my biological father. And so when I moved up here from a small town about 3 hours from Orlando, from where we are now, called Immokalee, Florida. And when I left there and came up here for school, I realized there was a deficit in my understanding and mentality of what it meant to be a young man, and what it meant to have purpose, and doing things in life that I didn't even realize I was doing it or why I was doing it. So from my story is where all of this really came to life, and making that journey from death to life really inspired me, man, and motivated me to get out there and help other young men.
Well, that's so good, and I'll tell you, I'm a little bit beyond being a young man.
Right, okay.
I'm going to be 56 here in just a little bit.
Still young.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And all the encouragement helps. But, to have someone like you speaking about this to the audience that you're speaking to is so vital now, because I can tell you, hearing this, I connect with it. Because what your story is, we go through life, and like you said, you don't even understand some of the things, like why we do, the mindset that we have. We just have all these life experiences that all are kind of mashed up, right? That informs our behavior.
Yeah.
And we go about doing what we do. And I spent a good majority of my life in that same place that you're talking about, not knowing. And it wasn't until God, again, you mentioned God, kind of intervened, that the Spirit starts to reveal these things.
Right.
And you begin to understand that those things of the areas of brokenness and hurt and deficit, like you said, that is so vital to understand and recognize, because then we can start to it starts to heal.
Yeah.
Right? We can't really heal what we don't know about.
Yeah. You touched on something there when you talked about healing. It is incredible to me that there's a multiple generation of men who that's exactly what we need.
Yes.
It's not God calling us up to be stronger men or be more spiritual. I believe for a lot of our men today, God's calling us to a place of healing, because we didn't have fathers who were loving or who were affectionate.
Yeah.
And so we see God through the image of the disciplinary, the punisher, the all some of that negative connotation, when God said, I want to be seen as the lover of your soul, the one that wants to heal you, the one that wants to restore you, not judge you because maybe you had a past that was rough, or maybe you got into some habits that were not of God. And I think that's so cool that you hit on that, man, because that healing piece is really what I think both of our ministries and work is helping young men and older men to realize that it is never too late to surrender to the Lord and say, God, heal these broken places so that I can be a renewed vessel for your work. And that's what you and your wife are doing, man. That's awesome.
As you're saying all of this, it's so true. When you're healing the young man, right? Because that's what the divorce and the broken homes and the fatherless homes come from this.
Yeah.
Or and to restore the young men so that when they get to the point to move into marriage, and they can begin to understand the responsibility that they have as men of God, especially, right? As the head of the home, as the husband that's supposed to love our wives like Christ loved the church, that we would give our lives for her. Right? It's so needed now.
Yeah.
To your point.
Yeah.
To your point.
Yeah, it's needed, and I'm thankful for the influences and resources like what you all are doing, because that's one thing my wife and I have spoken about. We had this idea, man, once a year we want to kind of, at the very least, once a year we want to do what we kind of call a marriage maintenance, where we get away and kind of go on some kind of retreat or something for ourselves.
That's awesome.
And we found, though, that it's really hard to identify resources that are kind of vetted and you feel like, okay, this is going to be a good investment.
Yeah.
And so anytime I see people like yourself putting together resources that marriages and families can use, I think it has an eternal impact. An eternal impact that we may not see it tomorrow, but we will see it generation after generation from now.
Yeah, I appreciate that, because that's really where our heart is, like yours for men. I mean, it's what's beautiful about where God's leading us both is that it's kind of the cycle of being a man. Right. And if you can attack the things that attack men, that the devil throws at us, right, early on, and help a young man understand, right, what it's like to walk out and the freedom that comes from that, right, to free yourself, to understand the things you have to work on as a young man.
Yeah.
It is. It's like a continuum of mentorship for men, and of course, my wife and I, like you had mentioned, we're in this together. So she mentors wives as well.
What do you think are some of those top challenges or attacks that young men and older men the same are being faced with?
I think it's a variety of things. I think, we're here at the Christian Chamber event, and we're believers, and we've seen the transformation in our lives. But as young men come up, and like what you've mentioned, fatherless homes is a big thing. And even homes where maybe dads aren't completely absent, but they aren't there all the time.
Passive.
I've seen, and I mentioned I was divorced twice, and I've got adult children from both of those marriages. And I can see, now that my eyes have been opened, right, and God kind of helped me become a better man, I see the consequences or the result of me not being in the home. And I was a dad that tried, I wanted to be involved. I wanted to be there, and there were a lot of circumstances that kind of blocked my involvement as much as I would have liked it to have been. But I can see that now in my children.
Wow.
And I think, too, this mindset that people have developed, especially about marriage and oh, well, the kids will be okay.
Co-parenting.
We're not in love anymore.
Yeah.
But that's all right. Yeah, we'll have them every other Christmas, and they'll get both Christmases. They get 2 Christmases.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's the world has crafted these lies that many of us believe.
Wow.
About they essentially lessen the reality of the impact that we have as men
Yeah.
when we're not present in the family.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest thing, because I've talked to people who aren't married but are getting married, and they make comments like, well, we're going to try it. And I'm thinking, when we get to a point where people think marriage is something you try, and if it doesn't work, well, you can have the dog and I'll get another, it's like, what?
Yeah, it's a test drive. It's not a commitment. It's not covenant.
It's not covenant. And the truth is, when it is covenant and you believe the truth and you are in a marriage that lives out what God has told us marriage is to be, it works.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful.
Yeah.
And it really is that relationship on earth
Yeah.
that exemplifies the love that God has for us, that he gave Christ to us.
Yeah.
I mean, what are you saying? So you're a young man, right? Father, husband. You shared that that's your priority, right?
Yeah.
Above all else.
Yeah.
And that's what inspires you and drives you.
Yeah.
So someone in your arena, what do you see as being like people of your age really fighting against?
That's a good question, man, and it's one of the things I'm gonna be touching on tomorrow. So I'll be speaking tomorrow in one of our keynote sessions, and through the time preparing for that, I'm just asking the Lord, what do you want me to say to these people? Because number one, I don't have the track record that everyone else in the lineup has, so I know I didn't get here by, way of reputation. There's no question that God is the only one that put me into this lineup. So Lord, what do you want me to say? And the one thing that God took me to was in Matthew 9:30, about 35. And Jesus is healing the people. He's out in the villages teaching, in the synagogues. He's healing of every disease, every sickness.
Yeah.
And the Bible says that he looked out on the multitude and he felt compassion because they were weary and scattered like sheep without a shepherd.
Wow.
Now my mind, I'm going to talk about this tomorrow, but my mind when I read that, I thought, well, if you had an ailment and I healed you of that ailment, you wouldn't have any weariness after that. You'd be excited.
Yeah.
If you had a sickness or you were paralyzed and I came and healed you, you'd be elated, right? So it got my mind thinking, well, what was Jesus seeing then? And what that verse shows us is that Jesus was seeing a spiritual assessment. And what he was seeing was that his people had grown weary and scattered away from something very important, which was truth.
So good.
They had scattered away from the promises of God. They had forgotten what God had done in their families. They had stopped talking and sharing. It had kind of fallen under the Roman oppression. And they quit on truth. And I think that's one of the biggest challenges for my generation. Is that church, there's a lot of church hurt in there. And people have grown up in the church and been hurt by the church, where they've met Christians who didn't live up to the gospel. And so what it's caused a lot of our generation to do is to fall away from the church, grow weary, grow scattered away from truth. And so what we're doing instead is we're compromising. We're saying, well, you know what? Is it really that bad to kill a baby? I have, it's my body. Is it really that bad to marry, someone else that God says I shouldn't be married? But I feel this feeling.
Yes.
Is this really what love looks like? And we've fallen away from the truth. And I think that is one of the biggest dangers for my generation, because there comes a point where the gospel is it's not ever going to be something that's up for mixture. It's sovereign, and it's God's way or not. There is no blend. There's no blended family when it comes to God's word.
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the biggest challenges is we have to get back to saying, you know what? I may not even understand this or fully agree, but I believe truth. I believe that God's way is the best way. So I'm going to submit to this and do it God's way, even if I don't believe it.
Yeah. And that's so, I mean, and you know, just speaking again from personal experience, I was that way. It's one thing to be, and we see it to people, I think, of all ages in their Christian walk, right? Where I go to church on Sunday. I mean, there was a period where I was angry at God. Confession time. I was angry at God. Because I was heavily serving in my church, worship team, you know, ministry, all of this stuff. And at the same time, I was out in the world doing my thing.
Right.
And, you know, kind of that Sunday morning Christian, everything's good, putting on the good face. Meanwhile, my marriage is falling apart at home and I'm out doing things I shouldn't. And it really, I became mad at God and blamed him because I began to suffer the consequences for my actions. And in that, just out of my own self-unawareness or ignorance or denial or whatever it was, I began to blame God for, like, how could you do this to me?
Wow.
And it really is exactly what you're saying. The lack of truth is really where that's impacting now and where we really need to get back to.
Yeah.
Man, I am so excited that I don't know. I'm here and I'm almost at a loss for words, just because of the vision that you have and what God's led you to do, because it is so powerful. It is so powerful. So you've got the book, right?
Yeah.
You're speaking tomorrow, which
Yeah.
is awesome. And if everything works out, I will be listening to you tomorrow, just so you know. Because really, it's really inspiring what you're saying. And by the way, I don't think it's either of our birthdays today, but if you can hear happy birthday in the background, it's someone's birthday, so we're going to pause and say happy birthday.
Yeah, somebody's saying happy birthday.
Everybody's saying happy birthday.
I am a few months out, so thank you.
But yeah, man, so you're speaking tomorrow.
Yeah.
You've got this book.
Uh-huh.
Tell us a little bit about the book.
Well, the mentality of success, man, it is, I like to think of it as a capsule of my 20s, because I really went through a rough patch there, man. God brought me literally back from the edge of death, of not knowing my value and not seeing life as something worth living anymore, because there was no color. Life had no color in my world. And it's like, you ever heard of there's living and then there's existing?
Yes.
Where I was on that existing side, just a little corpse walking around and trying to tie my existence or fulfillment to things that only leave you more empty. Like just superficial things, whether it's sex, whether it's money, whether it's, just all the things that you chase. But really, the more of it you get, the more emptier you feel if you don't have a foundation. And so the mentality of success is what I first walked through, of taking those dreams that God has placed in your heart.
Yes.
Then going from dreams to discovery, and discovering your value, who you are, what you're made of, and how you best serve. And then developing that value, right? That's the development phase, number 3, so that you can get out and make decisions that are legacy proof. They're legacy, with your legacy in mind.
Yeah.
And that's really what that 10-year mark was like for me. It was realizing, it was going back from, man, I'm not sure if life is worth living, to God sending a friend to put a book in my hand at the right time called A Purpose-Driven Life by Rick Warren. Right?
Yes, Rick Warren.
And then that began to turn on the light bulb that, hey, your life is for something. Because you got to remember, at that point, I've never known my biological father. So there's that, even if you don't acknowledge it consciously, there's an unconscious feeling of abandonment there.
Well, yeah, because fathers, I mean, again, coming back to what we were talking a little bit earlier, the impact that a father has on a child, is it can't be replaced by anything.
To understand that void, and then I got angry after that, man. Once I realized what the tricks that the devil was playing on my mind,
Yes.
and I realized my value, and I realized what God had called me to do, and walking in how to develop that, I said, I want to give this to other people. I want other young men to see this, because I know other young men are going through it. Because the thing about us as men, we suffer in silence. When we're out in public, it'll seem like everything is okay. But meanwhile, we could be suffering in our isolated and alone time, and I was one of those men. So I wanted to reach them through a book, something that can get with them in their alone time and say, no, you do have value. No, your life is for something. I don't care what the world is telling you. This is truth. And the truth is, the dreams that God has placed in your heart are for a reason, because we need the dreams that are inside of you. And helping people how to take that conception of dream to product or reality, but doing it God's way. So that's really what the book is about, and it's really helping people to understand what success really is. I don't believe success is what you do. I believe success is who you are.
Yes.
And when God made you, just like our shirts come with tags on the inside that say made in wherever, made in the USA, made in China, the inside of the shirt of your life, when God made you, it says made in purpose. And I want every young man, every young woman to see that they were made in purpose, and to help them gain more clarity on what that is.
I see a clothing line in your future, man. I would buy a shirt that tag says "Made in Purpose." Where can people get this book?
Well, they can go to thementalityofsuccess.com. Again, that's thementalityofsuccess.com. And yeah, anywhere where books are sold, really. Amazon, Barnes and Nobles. But if you want to help contribute to this cause, that's the best place to go, because it allows us to stay in contact with those who are purchasing the books, and to be able to create a community and to keep evolving this message, because this isn't just about me. I believe God gave me this book, which means it's bigger than me. So I want to invite other people into that, and let's spread this message together, so we can see more of our men and our families, the nucleus of the family, to be restored, because that's really what it comes down to. There's the only point of restoring men is so we can restore family, because family is where kingdom springs forth.
Yes, amen. So I'm going to ask you this, because I don't want to keep you here forever. I know you got a lot going on.
Fun,
could keep you here forever. We might do part 2 tomorrow.
Yeah, it's a good time. It's a good time, yeah.
What's the thing that in your own personal life, from a marriage perspective, because you shared a little bit about kind of what you've been through and where you are and how your marriage is if you could just pick one thing, there's probably 20 things, but if you could just pick one thing that you would speak out to other maybe young men or other couples out there to, as a word of advice maybe, or what it is that you see as something that's really aided to the success of your marriage, what would you say that is?
Man, I think the one thing that's aided my marriage the most is getting around other men who've been married longer, who have stronger marriages, who've had some failures, who can tell you what not to do. That's been the biggest promoter in my world and circle, and it's what's helped me the most. Because where I come from, you never saw healthy marriages, and it wasn't until I got around a pastor, a friend of mine. His name was Pastor Mike, and I asked him one night. We were doing like a round table of men, and he was mentoring us and discipling us. And I asked him, because I was so naive and young and dumb at that time. I said, Pastor Mike, how can you stay with one woman for the rest of your life?
That's an awesome question, though, right?
I'm like, why would you? Because I grew up being taught that it wasn't what made you a man is how many women you can know. Right? And I'm sitting, and he schooled me. He told me, he introduced me to God's blessing, which is marriage.
Yes.
And that, I never thought I would be married before then. I thought I would just, bounce around, from woman to woman before that point. But it was men like that who stepped into my life and imparted wisdom and truth into my life. Back to that point of truth.
Yes.
And that's what really drove me to see, hey man, this you can't have a good marriage. If you're willing to work on it, if you're willing to surround yourself with men and women for your wife that can help and sharpen your iron, then there's an eternal blessing that can come from that.
Yeah. Oh, I love that, because there's so much truth in that. Well, listen, I want to thank you. I want to thank you, man. This has been a blessing to get to know you. I'm looking forward to hearing you tomorrow. Looking forward to getting the book.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
And to do what I can do and we can do, my wife and I with 3-Chord Marriage, to get that book into people's hands. So.
Well, thank you for having me, and congratulations on your launch. This is going to be an awesome resource for people, and I can't wait to see it, man. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you.